My son Ryan had always been ambitious. Ever since he married Lily, he seemed desperate to prove himself worthy of her wealthy parents. They owned several properties across California, and I could tell he felt small compared to them. Still, I never thought he would go as far as betraying me. One sunny afternoon, Ryan and Lily came over with big smiles and a stack of papers. "Dad," Ryan said, "we're just updating some property documents for tax reasons. Can you sign this?" I trusted him completely. He was my only son. Without thinking twice, I signed. Lily smirked as she looked at me, but I ignored it. Later that evening, I got a call from my lawyer, Mr. Henderson. His voice was sharp. "Mr. Clarke, did you just transfer ownership of your villa to your son?" My heart froze. "What? No, that's impossible." He sighed. "You did, sir. They tricked you." I couldn't believe my own son would do that. I sat quietly processing the betrayal. Instead of confronting him immediately, I told my lawyer to let things play out. "Prepare the contingency plan," I whispered. What Ryan didn't know was that the villa wasn't fully in my name. It was under a trust I'd set up years ago, and the moment anyone tried to transfer it illegally, the trust would revoke the transaction and freeze any assets connected to it. Within an hour, my phone buzzed again. It was Ryan. He sounded panicked. "Dad, something's wrong. The villa, it's been locked under legal hold. What's happening?" I smiled quietly and said, "Son, maybe you should ask your lawyer or your wife's family."
Ryan's panicked voice trembled through the phone. "Dad, please, I don't understand. The villa's documents, they're frozen. The lawyer says there's a trust involved. What trust?" I leaned back in my chair, my voice calm. "The trust I created 15 years ago, Ryan. Remember when your mother passed away? I made sure our home could never be taken from me under deceit." Silence followed. I could hear Lily whispering something in the background, probably furious. "Dad, please, we didn't mean—" I cut him off. "Didn't mean what? To cheat your own father? To hand over my home so you could impress your wife's family?" He stammered, "No, it's not like that." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, I think it's exactly like that." Later that night, Mr. Henderson came by with a folder full of documents. "Good news," he said. "The trust activated immediately. They can't sell, mortgage, or even step inside the villa without your permission." I nodded, feeling both angry and strangely relieved. "Let 'em sweat," I said. Meanwhile, at Ryan's house, chaos was brewing. Lily's parents had found out that the villa transfer was blocked. Her father, a proud businessman, was livid. "You said it was done. You told us the villa was yours," he shouted at Ryan. Lily cried, "Dad, we didn't know he had a trust." But her father stormed out, embarrassed that his son-in-law had promised something he couldn't deliver. A day later, Ryan showed up at my doorstep. His eyes were red, his voice shaky. "Dad, I messed up. I thought I could impress them, show them I could provide something big. Lily kept saying her parents think I'm not good enough." I looked at him, my anger softening slightly. "So you thought the answer was stealing from me?" He looked down. "I wasn't thinking straight." I sighed. "Son, when your mother and I built that villa, we didn't build it for status. We built it for family. And now, look what greed has done." He broke down, crying. I hadn't seen him cry since he was a child. Lily arrived shortly after, tears in her eyes too. "Mr. Clarke, please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen." But I could see right through her. She wasn't sorry for the act, only for getting caught. "Here's what's going to happen," I said firmly. "You're both going to sign a written apology. You'll never touch any of my assets again, and I'll decide if I even want to help you in the future." Ryan nodded quickly, desperate. "Yes, of course." As they signed the apology letter, I called Mr. Henderson and asked him to witness it legally. Once it was done, I told Ryan quietly, "I forgive you, but trust once broken isn't easy to rebuild." A week later, Ryan came alone, without Lily. He looked exhausted. "Dad, Lily left me," he said quietly. "After her father found out what happened, they cut ties with me. She said she couldn't live with the humiliation." I stayed silent for a moment, then said softly, "Maybe now you'll understand who truly cared for you." He sat down beside me, staring into the garden. "I wanted to make her proud, Dad. I lost everything trying to prove something I never needed to prove." I put my hand on his shoulder. "Son, sometimes losing everything is the only way to find yourself again." Months passed. Ryan started helping me manage my rental properties. Slowly, we rebuilt our bond. He became humbler, more grounded, and finally began living with integrity. The villa remained in my name. And one evening, as we sat on the porch, watching the sunset, Ryan said to me, "Dad, I don't want the villa. I just want your trust back." I smiled and said, "Then you've already earned the most valuable thing I have."
Weeks turned into months, and Ryan worked tirelessly beside me. He started learning every aspect of property management, the taxes, the contracts, the repairs, things he once ignored because he thought he was too smart for them. I noticed something different in him now. He no longer bragged about money or tried to impress anyone. Instead, he woke up early, helped tenants fix problems, and stayed late reviewing paperwork. One evening, while we were checking invoices, he said quietly, "Dad, I realize now what I almost destroyed. I wanted to prove myself to people who didn't even care about me." I looked up and said, "Sometimes it takes losing everything to realize what really matters." He nodded and smiled faintly. "I don't deserve a second chance, but thank you for giving it anyway." That night, I saw a spark of the son I once knew, the kind-hearted boy who used to help his mother in the garden. A few months later, I got an unexpected call from Lily. She wanted to talk. I hesitated, but agreed to meet her at a cafe. When she arrived, she looked different, more humble, more tired. "Mr. Clarke," she said softly, "I came to apologize. I know nothing I say can fix what we did, but I want you to know I regret it deeply." I studied her face, then said, "Regret doesn't undo pain, Lily, but facing your mistakes takes courage." She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "Ryan was a good man. I just wanted him to be someone he wasn't." I sighed. "He always was good. You just didn't see it." She smiled sadly and left. That was the last time I saw her. 2 years later, Ryan had transformed his life. He launched a small property firm, not for wealth, but to help first-time homeowners avoid scams like the one he fell into. He named it True Trust Homes. When I attended his first opening event, I felt proud beyond words. He spoke to the crowd and said, "Everything I know about honesty and rebuilding comes from my father. He taught me that the real value of property isn't in bricks or land, but in integrity." People clapped, and I could feel tears in my eyes. After the event, we sat on the villa porch again, watching the sun dip behind the hills. Ryan said, "Dad, do you ever regret setting up that trust?" I chuckled. "Not for a second. That trust didn't just protect my villa, it protected you from yourself." He laughed softly. "Guess I needed saving." "We all do, son, just in different ways." Later that week, my lawyer called again. "Mr. Clarke," he said, "you know the trust will expire next year. You can decide what happens to the villa next." I smiled. "I already know," I said. "It'll stay in the family, but this time with the right hands." A year later, I officially added Ryan as co-owner of the villa, not because he asked for it, but because he earned it. When I handed him the papers, he stared in disbelief. "Dad, I don't know what to say." I smiled. "Just promise me one thing. Never let pride blind you again." He nodded firmly. "I promise." That evening, we had dinner together in the villa's garden, the same place where his mother once planted roses, the same place where I almost lost everything. Yet now, looking at my son's face, I realized I had gained far more than I'd lost. He wasn't the same man who once chased approval. He was stronger, wiser, and finally at peace. And as the night breeze moved through the trees, I thought to myself, maybe some lessons are meant to hurt first before they heal forever. One evening, almost a year after Ryan became co-owner of the villa, something unexpected happened. I was sitting in my study when a black envelope slid under my door. It had no return address, just my name in neat handwriting. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper with the words, "You think your son has changed? People don't change, they hide." My heart skipped a beat. Who could have sent this? At first, I dismissed it, thinking it might be a cruel prank. But the next day, my lawyer called again, sounding uneasy. "Mr. Clarke, someone tried to access the villa's ownership records online," he said. "The attempt came from an unverified account in your area." I frowned. "Could it be Ryan?" "Possibly, but I can't be sure," he replied. I didn't want to believe it. I had seen real growth in my son. He'd rebuilt everything from the ground up. Still, the doubt crept in. That night, I decided to visit Ryan's new office unannounced. When I walked in, he looked surprised but happy. "Dad, you should have called. I was just finishing paperwork." I noticed his assistant quickly close a laptop as I entered. I smiled politely. "Busy day?" He nodded nervously. "Yeah, just tax stuff." Something in his tone didn't feel right. I left without saying anything, but I asked Mr. Henderson to quietly investigate a few transactions linked to Ryan's firm. A week later, he called me again. "It's strange," he said. "There are small transfers moving between Ryan's company and another business owned by Lily." I froze. Lily? She had disappeared from our lives almost 3 years ago. How could she be involved again? That night, I went to Ryan's house and confronted him directly. "Son, is there something you need to tell me?" He looked confused at first, then guilty. "Dad, I swear it's not what you think. Lily reached out a few months ago. She wanted to invest in my company. I thought it would prove I've moved on and I could handle business professionally." "And you didn't think to tell me?" I asked, trying to stay calm. He sighed. "I didn't want to disappoint you again." I shook my head. "Disappointment doesn't come from mistakes. It comes from lies." He lowered his gaze in shame. The next morning, Lily called me herself. "Mr. Clarke, I'm sorry for everything that happened. I invested in Ryan's company because I wanted to make things right. I know you don't believe me, but I'm not trying to take anything." Her voice sounded genuine, but uncertain. I didn't answer immediately. "If your intentions are clean," I said, "then you'll have no problem showing me the contracts." There was silence. Then she agreed. 2 days later, we met at my lawyer's office. Ryan and Lily sat across from me, looking anxious. Mr. Henderson spread the documents across the table. He said, "Everything appears legal, but there's one clause here that could cause problems." He pointed to a section that stated Lily would gain full control of the company if Ryan ever defaulted on a loan. I turned to Ryan slowly. "Did you even read this before signing?" He looked stunned. I trusted her." I couldn't help but laugh, not out of joy, but disbelief. You trusted the same person who helped trick me out of my home? He buried his face in his hands. I stood up and said, "This ends now. I'll settle your debts myself, but she's out of your life for good." Lily stood up angrily. "You can't control him forever," she snapped. I looked her dead in the eye. "No, but I can protect him until he learns to protect himself." She stormed out, slamming the door. After that day, Ryan was devastated, but something changed in him again. He realized how close he'd come to losing everything twice. He sold the company, paid back every investor, and started a nonprofit that offered free legal advice to elderly people tricked by family scams, the very thing he'd once done to me. He named it Second Chances Foundation. When he told me the name, I couldn't stop the tears. Years later, when I grew older and weaker, Ryan took care of me in that same villa. He cooked, cleaned, and read books to me every night. On my 80th birthday, he said, "Dad, that villa isn't yours anymore." I looked at him, puzzled. "What do you mean?" He smiled. "It's ours now, but I don't want it for me. I'm donating it to the foundation so it can become a home for people who've lost everything to betrayal." I felt my eyes fill with tears again. For the first time, I truly understood. My son hadn't just changed. He had become the man I always hoped he would be.
After Ryan donated the villa to the foundation, word spread quickly through the town. News outlets picked up the story, calling it the redemption of Ryan Clarke. People who once whispered behind his back now spoke his name with admiration. He didn't seek fame, but his actions inspire hundreds. Elderly families who'd been cheated by their own relatives came forward for help, and Ryan's foundation grew rapidly. He spent his days traveling from town to town, teaching seminars about trust, inheritance, and the real meaning of forgiveness. Whenever someone asked what drove him, he always said, "I just want to make sure no parent ever feels the pain my father felt." Those words hit deep every single time. One afternoon, while I sat in my garden, an old neighbor stopped by, holding a newspaper. "Your boy's on the front page again," he said with a grin. I looked down at the headline, "Son who betrayed his father now protects thousands of families." I smiled softly and said, "He finally found his purpose." But that night, as I watched the lights of the villa from my porch, I felt a strange ache in my chest, not from regret, but from pride so heavy it hurt. I whispered into the quiet night, "Your mother would be proud of you, son." Months passed. My health slowly declined. Ryan insisted I move in with him, but I refused. I wanted to stay in the little guest house behind the villa that now belonged to the foundation. It was poetic in a way, living near the very place where our story of betrayal and redemption had begun. One evening, Ryan came to visit me after a long day of work. He looked exhausted but happy. "Dad," he said, handing me a stack of letters, "these are from the people we helped this month. They wanted to thank you too." I opened a few of them. Handwritten notes from seniors, each one telling how his organization had saved their homes, how they'd found hope again. I felt tears blur my vision. "You did all this, Ryan," I said. "No, Dad," he replied. "You did. You could have given up on me, but you didn't. That's what made all this possible." Later that night, he cooked dinner for us, just like I used to do when he was little. Grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, and apple pie. Halfway through dinner, he laughed, "Remember when I burned the kitchen trying to make pancakes for Mom?" I laughed too. Yes, and she pretended to eat them anyway. For the first time in years, we laughed without any shadows between us. No guilt, no pain, just father and son, finally at peace. After dinner, we sat outside under the stars. Ryan said softly, "Dad, I've been thinking. I want to rename the foundation." "To what?" I asked. He smiled. "The Clarke Trust. After you. Because it was your trust, not just legally, but emotionally, that saved me." My throat tightened. "That's beautiful, son." He nodded. "Every time someone walks through those doors, I want them to remember that even broken relationships can be rebuilt." A year later, Ryan received an award from the state governor for his humanitarian work. He invited me on stage with him, holding my arm to steady me. He said into the microphone, "This man beside me lost almost everything because of me. But instead of punishment, he gave me patience. Instead of revenge, he gave me redemption. I dedicate this award to him." The crowd erupted in applause, and I couldn't stop my tears from falling. I whispered, "You've already given me everything I need, son." That night, as we drove home, he said quietly, "Dad, you know the villa's empty right now. I want to restore it again, not for us, but as a memorial center for families who've overcome betrayal and rebuilt trust." I looked at him proudly. "Then let's do it together, son." And that's exactly what we did. We rebuilt the villa, room by room, turning it into a place where people came to share their stories, heal their wounds, and start again. It wasn't just a building anymore. It was a symbol of forgiveness carved in stone. As years passed, the Clarke Trust became a national movement. Ryan's story was featured in documentaries and books, but he always made sure one thing remained constant. Every new branch had a plaque at the entrance with a single line engraved. Forgiveness is the foundation of every home.
Years kept passing, and Ryan's name became known far beyond our little town. The Clarke Trust expanded into several states, helping thousands of families rebuild their lives. He was constantly invited to speak at universities and conferences, but no matter how far he traveled, he never missed our Sunday dinners at the villa. Every Sunday evening, he'd arrive right before sunset, carrying groceries in one hand and flowers in the other, saying, "Mom would have loved these." Then he'd cook, ask about my health, and listen patiently to my endless stories about the old days. Those dinners became the most precious moments of my final years. One autumn evening, when the leaves had turned golden, he came earlier than usual. "Dad," he said quietly, "I want to show you something." He led me outside to the front yard where the foundation had placed a new stone monument. It was beautifully carved, with words etched in bold, "This villa, once lost to greed, now stands for forgiveness and second chances." Underneath it said, "Dedicated to John and Emily Clarke, the ones who taught me love never gives up." I couldn't hold back my tears. He hugged me tightly. "This place wouldn't exist without you, Dad." "And it wouldn't mean anything without you," I whispered. As time went by, my health began to fade faster. The doctors said it was only a matter of months, but I wasn't afraid anymore. One night, Ryan came to visit after a long trip. His eyes were tired, but his smile was warm. "Dad, how are you feeling?" he asked softly. I smiled weakly. "Old, but proud." He sat beside me and held my hand. "I don't want you to ever worry about anything. The foundation's safe, and I've written everything down. Your name will always be part of it." I nodded, feeling peace in my heart. "Promise me one thing, son," I said quietly. "Never let the world harden your heart." He gripped my hand tighter. "I promise, Dad." That night, as he tucked a blanket around me like he used to do when I was young, I closed my eyes listening to his voice reading aloud from my favorite book. I could feel his words wrapping around me like warmth in the cold. "You taught me everything I know, Dad," he said softly as I drifted toward sleep. "You gave me more than a home. You gave me a second life." And for the first time in many years, I felt my heart completely at rest. The next morning, he came into the room to check on me and found me sitting peacefully in the chair by the window, a faint smile on my face. I was gone, but not truly gone, because the villa, the foundation, and his heart carried my spirit everywhere he went. Months later, the Clarke Trust held its largest event ever. Ryan stood on stage before hundreds of families, holding a framed picture of me and Mom. He said, "Everything you see today exists because one man chose forgiveness over anger. My father's legacy lives through every home we save, every heart we heal." The crowd stood and applauded, but Ryan wasn't done yet. He looked at the camera broadcasting live and said, "Dad, if you can hear me, I kept my promise. I didn't let the world harden my heart." His voice broke, but his smile didn't fade. After the speech, he walked back to the villa, now turned into the Clarke Memorial Center. He stood at the same spot where we'd once argued, where the betrayal had begun. He placed a single white rose on the porch and whispered, "I love you, Dad." A soft breeze blew through the trees as if answering him. And for a brief moment, he could swear he heard my voice in the wind. "I'm proud of you, son." He looked up at the sky, eyes shining with tears, and said, "You taught me that love isn't about keeping, it's about giving. And I'll keep giving till my last breath." As night fell, the lights of the villa glowed warm and golden, no longer a house of loss, but a symbol of redemption that would shine for generations. 20 years passed since my father's death, and the Clarke Memorial Center had become more than just a foundation. It was a movement. Across the country, people knew the Clarke name as a symbol of second chances. Ryan was now older, his hair touched with silver, but his eyes still bright with the same determination. He had dedicated every day of his life to spreading the message his father taught him, that forgiveness builds stronger homes than pride ever could. But lately, he found himself thinking about legacy, not fame or fortune, but what comes after him. One morning, while visiting the main branch of the foundation, he noticed a young volunteer speaking to a group of students. The boy's voice carried warmth and passion. "Trust is something we build, not buy," he said with confidence. Ryan smiled as he listened. There was something familiar in the way the young man spoke. When the session ended, Ryan walked closer. The boy turned around and grinned. "Dad, you came early." It was Ethan, Ryan's 17-year-old son. Ryan laughed softly. "You've got your grandfather's spirit, son. You speak like him." Ethan shrugged. "Guess it runs in the family." That evening, they sat on the villa porch, the same place where Ryan had once stood with his father years ago. Ethan looked at the stars and asked, "Dad, did you ever forgive yourself for what you did to Grandpa?" Ryan paused for a moment before answering. "It took me a long time, but yes, because forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about learning and changing. And he forgave me long before I forgave myself." Ethan nodded slowly. "I want to make sure I never disappoint you like that." Ryan smiled. "You'll make mistakes too, son. That's how we grow. But if you remember one thing, let it be this. Our name means nothing if our hearts aren't honest." Over the next few years, Ethan grew into a fine young man. He studied law and psychology, hoping to continue the Clarke mission. He helped expand the Foundation's programs for youth, teaching them about ethics, empathy, and the power of second chances. One day, he came to Ryan's office with a folder. "Dad, I have a proposal. I want to open a new branch in the same town where Mom grew up. I want it to be called Lily's Place, a center for women who want to rebuild their lives after losing everything." Ryan stared at him in silence for a moment, emotion washing over him. "You're naming it after your mother?" Ethan nodded. She made mistakes, but she changed too before she died. She helped at shelters in her final years. I want to honor that." Ryan's eyes filled with tears. He reached out and hugged his son tightly. "You've done what even I couldn't. You've forgiven everyone." Ethan smiled softly. "I learned from the best." Months later, Lily's place opened with great celebration. The mayor attended, the press covered it nationwide, and Ryan stood beside his son as the ribbon was cut. When he looked at Ethan addressing the crowd with confidence and compassion, he felt the same pride his father had once felt for him. After the ceremony, Ethan turned to him and said, "Dad, one day I'll take over the Clarke Trust, but promise me you'll still guide me when I need it." Ryan laughed gently. "Even when I'm gone, you'll hear me in the wind, just like I still hear my father." That night, they visited the old villa together. The lights glowed softly, and the air was filled with the scent of blooming roses planted long ago by Ryan's mother. Ethan stood silently for a moment, then said, "It feels like Grandpa's still here." Ryan looked up at the stars. "He is. He lives in everything we build, every heart we help." Ethan placed a white rose on the porch like his father once did, and whispered, "Thank you, Grandpa, for forgiving my dad so we could all be here today." As they walked back toward the car, Ryan looked one last time at the villa's golden windows and smiled to himself. He realized the story that began with betrayal had become a generational legacy of healing and hope, and as the wind blew softly through the trees, he could almost hear two familiar voices, his father and his mother, whispering together, "The house remembered love." Years later, the Clarke name had become legendary. The foundation had branches across the country, and its mission of forgiveness and renewal had touched millions. Ryan, now in his late 70s, watched from the sidelines as Ethan led with wisdom and compassion beyond his years. The once young man who'd betrayed his father had turned into the father of a man who restored hope to the world. One morning, Ryan stood at the window of his modest home overlooking the hills where the villa once stood. The Clarke Memorial Center now occupied that land, its gardens filled with roses, its walls engraved with stories of people who had rebuilt their lives. He smiled softly as memories flooded back. The first betrayal, the phone call, the tears, the forgiveness, the laughter, all woven into a single lifetime of lessons. Ethan arrived that morning holding a small wooden box. "Dad," he said gently, "this came for you from the archive team. They found something while restoring old files." Ryan opened the box and froze. Inside was a sealed envelope addressed to him in his father's handwriting. The ink was faded, but the words were clear. "To my son Ryan, when you finally understand." His hands trembled as he opened it. The letter read, "My dear son, if you're reading this, it means you've found your way home. I always knew you would. This villa, these walls, they were never about wealth. They were about love, the kind that forgives and rebuilds. I didn't build this house to keep you out. I built it so that one day you'd return and fill it with kindness again. When you do, promise me one thing. Pass it forward. Don't let our story end with us. Love, Dad." Tears streamed down Ryan's face as he clutched the letter to his chest. "You knew all along. You knew I'd come back." Ethan placed a hand on his shoulder. "He never stopped believing in you, Dad." Later that day, Ryan visited the villa one last time. He walked slowly through the corridors that now held photos of families the Clarke Trust had helped. Every corner carried a memory: his father's laughter, his mother's voice, the echo of his own mistakes and redemption. He reached the garden where his father used to sit and found a single rose blooming, even in winter. He knelt beside it and whispered, "I kept my promise, Dad. I passed it forward." A soft wind brushed his face, as if answering him. That evening, Ethan hosted a ceremony in honor of the Clarke family legacy. The hall was filled with people from every walk of life: families, elderly couples, young students, all standing in gratitude. Ryan took the stage slowly, holding the old letter in his hand. He looked around and said, "Many years ago, I tried to impress people by giving away what wasn't mine. But today, I've learned that true worth doesn't come from what you own, it comes from what you give. This foundation isn't about me or my father. It's about all of you, who chose forgiveness when hate was easier." The audience rose to their feet in thunderous applause. As he stepped back, Ethan took the microphone and said, "My father taught me that healing isn't inherited. It's built, choice by choice. And today we honor not just his journey, but the man who started it all, John Clarke." The lights dimmed, and a large projection filled the screen behind them, showing an old photo: John and young Ryan standing outside the villa, smiling. The crowd grew silent. Ryan looked at the image, tears glistening in his eyes. He whispered, "Thank you, Dad. You turned my biggest failure into my life's purpose." Years later, after Ryan passed peacefully in his sleep, Ethan continued the Clarke legacy. He built new centers around the world, each carrying the same symbol: a white rose and the inscription, "The House Remembered Love." On the 50th anniversary of the Clarke Trust, Ethan gave a speech under the same stars his father and grandfather once watched. He said, "My grandfather built a home, my father built forgiveness, and I will build a world that never forgets their lesson, that no matter how far we fall, there's always a way back through love." As the crowd applauded, a soft breeze swept across the garden, carrying the faint scent of roses. And for a brief, quiet moment, Ethan could swear he heard two voices in the wind, his father and grandfather whispering together, "You kept the promise, son." He looked up at the sky, smiling through tears, and said softly, "Yes, I did." And beneath that starlit sky, the Clarke legacy lived on, not in bricks or documents, but in hearts forever changed by forgiveness.